you, Fred, for that insightful address, and thank you. Sorry. And thank you to the House to Culture and Develop for the invitation to be here today, and all the help in both facilitating my work for the exhibition and my presence in this conference. Finally, thanks to Diedrich and Ensemble for including me in this fantastic exhibition. I thought I'd start today with some earlier work to set up how I approached my contributions to the exhibition. This image you're looking at is a vacant lot in Lancaster, California, a city near Edwards Air Force Base, which you may know by the shuttle landing there on occasion. And Frank Zappa lived there as a teenager, his father being employed in the defense industry. And I think the defense industry, I'm going to talk mostly about landscape, and I think the position of the defense industry, it's been huge. Oh, okay. The position of the defense industry in Southern California has been really influential economically, and you know, with people like Frank Zappa being the product of it. I started photographing on the fringes of LA in the mid-90s. This is an image of on the edge of Barstow, looking back towards Los Angeles. From that point until 2007, it was a period of intense development on the eastern edge of Los Angeles, really around all the fringe areas of LA, the South in Orange County, and up through what's called the Inland Empire, the east of LA, and up to Lancaster. When I started working there, strawberry fields and orange groves were being cleared and the land was being put up for sale. Large vacant lots dominated the landscape, like this one. This later became a housing development. Over time, there were infrastructure projects to facilitate the growth of the city system in the Inland Empire. The Inland Empire became, it was really amazing to watch it was like a city had been built on the edge of Los Angeles during the 90s and early 2000s. They built roads, they built electricity grid, they had big hydroengineering projects, and these allowed the development of communities, residential and industrial enterprises. This particular development was called the Lake at the Colonies, which was, the Colonies was the housing development. And many of the names belie the imperialistic nature of this place. The two big industries driving development were the development itself and large warehouses or regional distribution centers for the growth of global trade coming through the Port of LA. The Port of LA, when I moved to Los Angeles in 1990, was not the biggest port on the West Coast, but now it is by far the biggest port on the West Coast, and most of that is from the growth in container shipping into the Port of LA. And one of the things that they designed for the Inland Empire was a direct rail link from the Port of LA to the Inland Empire, and so the trucks wouldn't have to come into the city. They could just come to the edge and then go right back out. And so they built these gigantic warehouse facilities for, like this one is called the Target Regional Distribution Center, and what you're looking at is about a mile and a half of leveled earth, and then what they built there was just a gigantic warehouse for the store at Target. And then the goods would come in there from the Port of LA, and then they'd be shipped out all around the southwest. So, where was I? Oh yeah. So I remember thinking, so these are some of the developments. This is a school. This is a housing development in the early stages where they terraform the land. And this is that same housing development from the other side. This, it's kind of funny, the name of this housing development is called Shady Lane Planned Community. So it was by no means shady at the when they first built it. This is another one that has an equally kind of absurd name. It was kind of an amazing place. The pace of development was really so intense, and its ties to the global economy were so complete that you kind of looked at it with a sense of horror and amazement. As I was winding down the Inland Empire project, I came across this mall in San Bernardino, designed by Victor Gruen. I found the architecture strange enough to warrant some research into Gruen, who was a big figure in the development of shopping malls in the US, and a big player in the redevelopment of decrepit city centers. In researching Gruen, I spent a lot of time looking at architectural forums from the 1930s to 1960s. Architectural Forum was an interesting publication, and one that I really don't see around today. It was a magazine of building, and it struck me as I looked through issue after issue that I was looking at the theorization and building of the landscape I grew up in. This kindergarten looked a lot like the kindergarten that I went to. This was a design for a shopping mall that I spent a lot of time at during my teenage years. And the overwhelming feeling one gets from looking through these years of architectural forum is one of a coming utopia where architecture and design solve all of society's problems. This ad I find astounding. From I think a 1950-something issue of Architectural Forum. And I had no idea what they meant by the ad, if they mean what you would think it means today, or if it was something different. This is this is Gruen's design for a redevelopment project, a mall in downtown Rochester, New York, that opened in the year I was born. This is that same mall in 2008, 2 years before it was demolished. The inside of the mall entertained many of the motifs that drove places like Disneyland. It had a monorail. This monorail ran around the central atrium at Christmas time, and it was still up. I think I photographed this mall on Valentine's Day. So it was still up. It was, the mall was really about to be torn down and was emptying out. At the center of the atrium was this sculptural clock called the Clock of the Nations. And this thing was really amazing. It was like each of these pods was about, I think about 5 or 6 feet tall. And so each pod was on an arm that extended out from the central column. The whole thing was maybe like 5 meters in diameter. So it consisted of 12 dioramas representing 12 nations. Although some of them weren't even nations, they weren't nation states. Ireland was 1 o'clock. Puerto Rico was 2 o'clock. Scotland was 3. Japan 4. Thailand 5. Poland 6. Italy 7. Canada 8. Germany 9. Israel 10. Nigeria 11, and the United States 12. And I have really no idea why they picked the countries they did, or the nations, or peoples. It really made no sense at all. But when the clock functioned, the dioramas, each capsule was closed, and it would open on the hour, and a little light would pop on at the top of the capsule, and the diorama on the bottom would spin, and a little song would play. That would be something that the person who had so little grasp of geography had chosen. So the songs were as equally as convoluted as the dioramas themselves. Entering the 60s, the clock of the nation seems typical of the time and indicative of many of the attitudes at play in the United States. Americans embraced their place at the center of a world empire, but I think they understood little about the people and places that made up that world. The clock of the nations, I think, really represents a naive globalism and an equally naive utopianism, both of which were confronted by reality as the 60s progressed. This is the building you saw earlier in the Architectural Forum article, Progress in St. Louis. And this is it today, which is kind of deeply depressing to me, because on the inside of that building was that beautiful lobby designed by Noguchi. And now that lobby is, the Noguchi structure is hidden by a false ceiling with like asbestos tiles. So since 2008, I've been working on several projects centered on the ruins of this post-war modernist moment. This is one of Bruin's best-known shopping malls in the Chicago suburbs, where I grew up. Randhurst Shopping Mall. This is that mall in 2009. All of this architecture really, I think it failed because larger social and economic trends made it dispensable. In some cases, the city itself changed. Dying inner cities could not be saved through architecture when race and poverty were the causes of their demise. Like, this was one of the things about Bruin in Rochester when he built that mall. That mall in this downtown Rochester, it's called Midtown Plaza, was built to revive Rochester, which downtown Rochester is just, it's pretty dysfunctional. And the shopping mall did nothing to solve that problem. In some cases, the businesses themselves failed or were eaten up by larger corporations, as in the case of the American Stove Company, which was the public storage facility that you saw. That company was bought by Maytag, and was then bought by, I don't know, some larger conglomerate, and so they closed their St. Louis headquarters and the building repurposed. Or this Bell Telephone Company building, the breakup of Bell Telephone and then the conglomeration of telecom companies made the Syracuse building obsolete, and so you can see it's kind of it's in disrepair and empty. The bird poop kind of lining the top edge of it. In the case of Bruin's Mall, the retail model itself changed to privilege big box plazas malls. So that's what we have in the United States now, these highly landscaped areas that have a bunch of big stores like Target or Depot or IKEA that you can see here. Or there are now these kind of luxury malls that have apartments and storage units and all kinds of stuff, restaurants, all included in the same complex. This one outside Boston. There have also been population and economic shifts away from places like Syracuse, St. Louis, or Kansas City, which is pictured here. And I found the Great Plains to be a particularly interesting place. I've started another project about the Great Plains. This is the BOK, Bank of Oklahoma Center in Tulsa, which is designed by Caesar Pelley, who designed the Trump Towers. And also, he worked in Bruin's firm in the 60s, and he designed that elevator shaft and information booth that originally caught my eye in that San Bernardino Mall. This is the BOK Tower in Tulsa, which was designed by the same architect who designed the World Trade Center, and it looks kind of nearly identical, if anyone remembers what the World Trade Center looked like on the inside. When you go inside the first floor of this building, it looks really very similar. It's kind of creepy. Tulsa has a steady stream of money from oil and gas. It's one of the, in the plains, there's cities that are doing actually quite well from oil and gas and industries. Some people might know North Dakota is the big boom state in the United States right now. You can't, it's hard to get a rental car in North Dakota. It's hard to get a hotel room in North Dakota because there's so much business drilling oil shale. And so Tulsa has a steady stream of money, but and there's lots of oil and gas around in Oklahoma. And but large parts of the city are fairly decrepit. Its civic center was at one time a notably designed urban planning project. There was a big article in Architectural Forum in the late 50s about the design of this plaza here, and now it's closed, and some of the buildings are either in need of renovation or they're in the process of being demolished. This building I find really interesting. I think it's part of Oral Roberts University. Nearby in Wichita, Wichita hasn't really lost population over the last 20 years. It's actually grown. It's become a little bit bigger city, but it also has like a downtown full of empty buildings. All these 3 buildings are all empty buildings, and I don't know if the city's going to renovate them or not. This is a department store slated for redevelopment. And I just love this little still life window there. Many of the projects in downtown Wichita retain the utopianism of the former era, but with a half-hearted sense of optimism. You can't really see, I think, in the projection, but there's a big sign in that walkway that says, "Welcome to the downtown of tomorrow. Pardon our dust. Revolution in progress." So it's very, like, it has that same utopian idea about we're going to, build this great city, but it's so half-hearted now. It's like almost like the builders themselves don't believe it. So one of the big stories in the Midwest is the shifting nature of agriculture and its relation to oil and gas. Wichita was built on grain storage and distribution. This is a set of grain elevators just north of downtown. And you can see like this whole area is full of these big buildings. And I think it's hard to get a sense of scale, but they're, I think each one of those, each grain elevator is like maybe 10 or 15 stories high. So they're really large buildings, and you can see they're mostly falling apart. as the economy changes. Farmers are increasingly repurposing parts of their land for oil and gas facilities and for telecom development. Kansas is full of cell phone towers, and I don't know, I guess everywhere is full of cell phone towers, but you really notice them in Kansas because they're all on these big towers that stick out from the landscape. And so this is a cell phone tower just west of Kansas City. And the farmers, they rent out portions of their land for these towers. So it's actually, you know, it's a good source of income. And they also, you know, rent out portions of their land for fracking wells and stuff. And this is a nearby ranch to that tower, just around the corner from that tower. This refinery in Coffeyville, Kansas, was originally built in 1906. In the last 15 years, they've added a gasification plant to use petroleum coke to make nitrogen and fertilizer. So it's this really busy hub. There's huge lines of trucks going in and out of this little town about halfway between Kansas City and Tulsa. This is a pipeline facility further south in Oklahoma on land operated by the Nature Conservancy as a tallgrass prairie preserve. The preserve seems a strange mix of natural resource development and nature preserve. So there's the previous site is just at the end of this road, and then there's these herds of buffalo that roam. And there's pipelines for oil and gas that run under the ground, and compressor facilities. And wells dot the landscape. And this is really a lot like the landscape that I photographed for the project here, only the facilities that I photographed in California are renewable energy facilities, and these are oil and gas. Okay, and shifts in global power have also shifted the way military spending in the United States is distributed. There have been lots of base closings over the last 30 years with the decline of the Cold War, which has shifted spending away from bases like this submarine detection base in Maine and towards places like the new NSA facility in Utah, which has been in the news over the last couple of weeks. It's, you know, basically this windowless building. But this base was just abandoned. It looks like people just walked out one day and just left it empty, and it's been that way for a few years now. As I said when I was talking about Lancaster, military spending has been a big part of development in Southern California. The decline in real estate prices in Los Angeles in the early 90s was due in large part to the decline in the aerospace industry. This radar station between Barstow and Lancaster was turned into a prison after it was decommissioned as part of the National Air Defense Command. The prison itself was closed in 2000, and now the facility is pretty much empty. So when thinking about the Whole Earth Project, my initial thought was to find some of these decommissioned bases. And there are lots of them all over the desert because it was such a big part of the economy. And also I thought I'd look at energy in Southern California. And so this is from the CLUI website. CLUI is the Center for Land Use Interpretation, and I think they have representation in the exhibition. It's a fantastic organization. They have this really great website that if you're traveling around the United States, I'd take a look at it, and you can find all kinds of things to go see that are off the beaten path that would not be in a tourist guide. So this is the area that I was looking at. This is Air Station and prison, and just south of that is a big solar facility. The Lockhart, California, Harper Lake, this solar facility is where the green, just to the right where the green arrows are. And then Barstow itself is a big military town, so they have a big marine supply base where they have supplies that they then ship out all over the world. And also that area, just to the left of Barstow is the area that PG&E had that big toxic spill that was depicted in that movie with Julia Roberts. Can't remember the name. Anyways, so it's kind of an area that's very deterritorialized. It's got the military stuff, it's got a bunch of energy stuff, but it's a lot of desert and space that land that people aren't all that much interested in. And there's solar arrays everywhere. All over the desert, they're popping up, and they're really large facilities. This is the Kramer Junction Solar Energy Generating Station, or SEGS, just south of the Boron Air Station. And how these things work is they're not like photovoltaic cells. They're gigantic mirrors that take the sun's energy and focus it on a pipe that generates steam that then drives turbines. So this is the Lockhart, California SEGS, and yeah, you can see those mirrors. Each of those mirrors is about I think like 4 meters tall, and it's a big semicircle that focuses the light onto a pipe. And I guess it can get so hot at the focal point that if a bird flies into the middle of it, it's like instantly zapped. And there are miles of these mirrors that are connected by a pipeline to a generating station, which you can kind of see in the background. You can't really see it from the projection, but it's back there. There's a big building that has smokestacks. That's where the turbines are. In the foreground, there's this little wildlife refuge, Harbor Lake Wildlife Viewing Area. And when I drove up to look at the solar array, I saw signs for this refuge and parked to take a look. And so I got out, and there are boardwalks that run around a drying saline lake. So all the white stuff is not snow, but it's salt. And there was a lady in a van who had lived there for 6 weeks. This woman, it was kind of interesting to run. It was an interesting juxtaposition for me, because there's this lady that she lived in a van, and she just went around from one piece of BLM, Bureau of Land Management land, to another, and you can park there for up to 2 months, and then you have to leave and go somewhere else for like 2 years before you can come back. So that's what she was doing. She was just traveling around. She'd park somewhere for like 2 months, and so she parked right here. And she said I was the only person that had come to see this space in the 2 months that she was there. Birds seemed to love the place, and if you ignored the construction to the south and west, there was nothing else for miles. California is full of these open spaces, which are often deceptive in their uses and biodiversity inhabiting them. There's actually a lot, it looks like there's nothing there, but there's actually a lot going on there that you can't see, and most of it is in the top, like 3 feet or meter of Earth. And the solar arrays, they require that the top, like 4 or 5 feet they require that the Earth be flattened. So they scrape off that top 4 feet, and that's become like kind of a big issue for environmentalists because you really can't lay these solar facilities out everywhere and without really disrupting things. So the world's largest solar array, Ivanpah SEGS, on the border of Nevada and California, which is a little farther, like kind of just beyond the picture on the edge of those mountains, it's faced huge criticism because of this. This is the Cogentrix SEGS-2. So they tried twice at this facility and to develop the solar facility, and then on the other side of the valley in those mountains is the Yarrow Ravine rattlesnake habitat area. So a little over 100 miles south of Barstow lies the Salton Sea. This was the other area I visited. The Salton sink existed for millennia as alternately a freshwater lake and a dry basin. It flooded at times, apparently. But in around the turn of the century, I think around 1906 or something, there was an accident and a dam broke or something, and the entire volume of the Colorado River ran into this area, this basin, for 2 years and formed this gigantic Salton Sea. So in the 40s and 50s, developers began to create vacation communities in the area, which is a short drive from San Diego and Los Angeles. So it was going to be the new vacation resort area in Southern California. But without fresh water, which hadn't flowed into the lake since 1912, I think, it started to turn saline. So now it dried up, and the main resort town of Salton City, which you're looking at, was never completed, and its main ruins have, for the most part, been removed, and there's just these small houses and trailers. And now there are rows of telephone poles. If you go there, there's just like these streets that were never built and rows of telephone poles for houses that were never built. And the sea itself smells intensely of dead fish and sulfurous compounds. I don't know exactly what is in it, but it smells bad. On the eastern side of the sea, there's a history of volcanic activity, making it ideal for geothermal energy. You can see up here, you can see these 4 big factories are geothermal energy generating stations. And then the little island in the center is the Sunny Bono National Wildlife Refuge. Geothermal plants, these geothermal plants, pipes run thousands of feet into the earth, and water is pumped through them and turns into steam that then drives turbines, which generate electricity. So they're huge industrial constructions. And there are 7 of these plants in a few square miles, surrounded by all those fields were sugar beets. It's called the Imperial Valley, is the largest producer of sugar beets in the United States. And there's big sugar plants. At the center of the geothermal plants is the Sunny Bono National Wildlife Refuge. As you can see from the photos of the Salton Sea, there are lots of birds in this area. They love it, and so they created this refuge. And I really like the design of the refuge because it looks like a construction site rather than like a park. It's built for the birds and not as an aesthetic object for people, although the birds that it attracts, I think, is the goal, so the bird watchers will come and you can see, I think, thousands of different species. So, yeah, like this field is, they built this field and planted it with plants that the birds like, because the birds raided all the beet fields, so to attract the birds back to the refuge, they planted these fields. And then there's another set of fields across the road that every night the birds fly back across the road to roost. And you can see the geothermal plants in the background. The hill at the end of the point is remnants of volcanic activity, which makes it obvious why you would put geothermal plants in this area. This lagoon is a man-made construction so that the birds will have a place to brood, so that they built these islands so that there wouldn't be any predators. And that's the island, that little lagoon on the right, and then in the distance you can see two more of the geothermal plants, and then the park kind of goes out around the point and out to the Salton Sea. So, and what really excited me about the places I made these images was the close proximity of the wildlife refuges and the renewable energy sources. And I think what it says about both the landscape of California and the environmental movement, it's, I think the fact that the approach to nature has been bureaucratized and the alternative energy has been industrialized runs counter to prevailing stereotypes. So I found that really interesting. So I did not expect those solar facilities to be quite as big and industrial as they are, and I had no idea that they had those geothermal plants by the Salton Sea, and I was really surprised by the way they were combined right up next to these wildlife refuges. I think, I think it's interesting that they're there too, because they're in a place that is kind of away from all of the territorial disputes of the city. Like, nobody's going to fight the building of these plants out in the desert, just as they didn't fight the military bases that were out there. And but I think the trick will be to, have facilities like the parks, wildlife refuges, and I wonder if this kind of thing can be built like in a more contested terrain. So that's